Hey, in this video I'm going to demonstrate how to create a simple page using HTML5 tags, the header tag, the section tag, the article tag, the side tag, and the footer tag. I'm also going to be reviewing different font sizes, pixels, ems, rems, and we will also do media queries for a responsive layout. So we're going to start from scratch. I'm going to be using the HTML5 boilerplate, so head on over to initializr.com, and when you're over at initializr.com, click on classic HTML5 boilerplate button. When you do that, you'll get a set of options in here. We're just going to pick the most basic options. You want to uncheck minified, uncheck all these other options here. We're going to keep it pretty straightforward and simple. Okay, good. So once you do that, you'll scroll a little bit down, click download it, and when you do, you'll get a initializer zip folder. Unzip it, and inside it you'll get these items in there. You get a CSS folder, and click into that, you'll get a link to, rather a file to normalize, which is going to be your browser reset file. You'll have an empty image folder, JavaScript folder. Inside you'll have main.js, which will be empty. And the only thing in Venner you'll have is the modernizer, which is a feature detection tool. So that's also good to go. So we want to use all of that. And you'll have an index.html page, which will look like this when you put it into your text editor of choice. In this video, I'm going to be using Sublime Text. No particular reason for Sublime Text. I also like Atom.io, which is also a great text editor. So this is the file that you get, and if you preview this file, index.html, in your browser, you'll get hello world. This is the HTML5 boilerplate, which is right over here. So we can go ahead and delete that. We won't be needing that for now. Save that. You refresh this page. Nice and clean. So in this video, I want to be creating an HTML5 sample page. I'm going to be using placeholder.com for, placeholder.com for all the images. Making it really simple to include images and the sort of prototype, if you will, and we'll make it also responsive. We're going to be using media queries for a responsive layout. So this is a great documentation page about media queries. So let's get started. So the first thing I want to do is just create a basic page. I'm not going to worry about mobile responsiveness as of right now. So I'll just keep it kind of straightforward. So first thing I want to do is create my sort of a wrapper, if you will. Let's go ahead and create main. Oops. And main tag should only really be used if you're wrapping content that's not being repeated anywhere on your web page. So if you have a one-page website, should be good to go. So nothing here is going to be repeating throughout the website because we're not actually going to be using a navigation in this scenario. So main should work just fine. This will help to keep things in a box container in the center of the page. Let's start with the header tag, class site header. I'm using classes for things like the header tag, for example, because that's because you can have more than one header tag on a page. So it's not only just at the top about your website, you could also have it inside an article tag, for example. So we'll just call this responsive website example. Okay, good. I'm going to indent that. Let's create a subheading as well. Includes samples of pixels. We'll also do ems, and we'll also do rems as well. Cool. So we have all that good to go. So there's our header. So if I save this, refresh the page, here you go. Very good. So there's no styles here as of yet. So typically I just work on the HTML part and then I include the styles afterwards. So let's go ahead and create a section now. We'll call this one copy container. Oops. Make sure we have that good to go. I'm always including these closing notes as well for each tag because as your website grows, it's going to get really kind of difficult to track where you open and close the tag. So this is a great way to make a note for yourself in the future. Like this is, hey, this particular closing tag is closing this class right over here. So really good habit to get into that. So the first thing I want to do inside here, we're going to create our div container class. And this is going to be our sort of, let's say, just copy. I'm just going to put some introductory text, things like that. So straightforward and div and copy. Let's go ahead and indent this as well. Inside the copy area, we're going to go ahead and create an article tag. And we'll give it a class of post. Okay, let's go ahead and close that. And inside the article tag, let's go ahead and create a header. Class of post header. And header. And inside of here, I'll give it an h2 tag. Responsive. Well, let's actually call it using media queries, something like that. Let's give it h3, includes, let's just give it pixel m rem, different. Okay, let's go ahead and select these two and hit the tab key to indent. Cool. And let's not forget that closing comment, post header. Excellent. And let's keep going. And here I'm just going to create some placeholder text. So if you're in Sublime Text, and Atom also does this as well, if you type in the word lorem, just like that, and hit the tab key, you'll get a bunch of placeholder copy, which is exactly what we want. Cool. Save that, refresh the page. So far, so good. Okay, cool. So this is our article tag inside the copy. So outside of the copy container, I'm going to create an aside class site sidebar. And typically aside tags are going to be used for, not typically, aside tags are used to include content that's tangential. In other words, it's related to what we're doing here. So we're going to go ahead and close this here, sidebar. And what you can do in here is you can create related information about whatever it is we're writing about in here. So for instance, you could do an unordered list, give it an li, and let's just include a link to this documentation page. Pop that in here, and let's call this using media queries. Close that. Perfect. So this is, related content to that as well. And okay, so now we also want to include maybe a link to information about the pixels, the M's, and the REMs. So let's go ahead and do that as well. And here's a great page about font sizes. This is also on the MDN documentation website. So in here you'll find information about pixels, M's, REMs, and so on and so forth. So there's some examples in here how to use that. So we can also include a link to this as well inside our sidebar. So let's create another list item. Okay, we just need to copy this link over. Copy that. Paste that in here. Cool. And we'll call this one font sizes. Nice. So now we have information that's related to whatever content we're putting in here. So we have a sidebar as well. Now, keep in mind, although in this example I'm going to have this sidebar floated to the right, you don't necessarily need to have your sidebar floated to the right. You can still use the aside tag and just have the content underneath. So that's totally fine as well. Cool. So we have our header tag. We have an example of a section tag. We have an example of an article tag in action. We have a side tag as well. So the last thing we want to include is our footer. Class site footer. Let's put that comment in here. And our footer can have something like copyright, etc., etc. Okay, let's go ahead and indent that as well. Save it, refresh, and that's it. So pretty straightforward. Here's our copy. So let's go and style this. So I'm going to jump into my CSS folder, main.css. And if you scroll down, because we're using HTML5 boilerplate, it does come with its own resets. Oh, and actually before I even include some styles, I'm going to include an image right over here. So image, source. Now remember, we're going to be using this placeholder, this website here. So here's an example of how to do that here. Here's a whole example with an anchor link in here. We just want to copy just the tag part. I'm going to go to replace this, erase that, paste that in here. So image, source, and then a link to placeholder. And we can go ahead and include the size of the image we want this to be. So I'm going to make this kind of large, 800 by, let's say, 400. Save that, come back, refresh this page, and there's that image. Cool. And there's a reason why I'm making this so large. I'll show you how to make this responsive, because this is going to be a responsive website. So the first thing we want to do is go ahead and style this. And the first thing I'm going to do is scroll to the very top, and I want to select this container tag right over here. Go ahead and target that container tag. It's a class. Now, I typically use classes, by the way, as a default. I only use IDs anytime I'm including JavaScript, because JavaScript is more strict. You want to target an ID element, so that way you're not targeting multiple things like that. So I typically reserve IDs when I'm using JavaScript. For everything else, I go for classes. It's definitely much safer than using IDs, because remember, IDs you can only use once on a page, whereas classes you can use the class name over and over again throughout your website. So definitely keep that in mind. So the first thing I'm going to do is use max width. I'm going to give this a max width of 960 pixels. Save that. Okay, and the reason, and I'm gonna give this a border just so we can see what's going on. 1 pixel, solid, give it a nice bright red color. Let's go ahead and refresh this page. And here's our container, if you will. Let's give it maybe some margin around it as well. Let's stick with pixels for now. Keep it pretty straightforward. 5 pixels. Save. Actually, let's go with 15 pixels. Refresh this page just so we can have it off a little bit. Okay, so what we're doing here is that this is the container, and I want this container to be centered. Now, the reason why I'm using max width instead of just width, and I'll show you right now, because I'm always thinking about how can we make this responsive. Let's go ahead and center this as well. Refresh this page. So since right now we're just using a fixed value, a fixed width, if you will, if I try to resize this window, you'll see all of a sudden we have a horizontal scroll. We don't want that. We don't want that to be in a responsive website. What we'd rather have is max width. So when you include max width instead, save this, refresh the page, and you try to resize this browser, you'll see that the container was going to resize along with the browser viewport, which is really great. So all this is saying is that the container, it could be the maximum width will be 960 pixels wide. That's it, but it could be less. So that's what this is max width is telling us. Now, if you continue to resize this even further, you'll see that here's that horizontal scroll bar again. And the reason why that's happening here, and I think you may have guessed it, is this image is not resizing. So we kind of need to use this concept with the image as well. So what we want to do is use this global selector, the asterisk. We want to target all the image tags, and we want to give it a max width of 100 pixels, 100%, and give it a height of auto. Save that, refresh this page. And what you'll see now is that not only is the container resizing automatically, but also the image. So the image, what we're saying here, the image can be 100% of whatever size it is, which is 800 pixels, but it could be less than that. So if I resize this browser here, you'll see the browser window, if you will, you'll see that it resizes as well. So remember, we're keeping that responsive idea. We haven't even used any media queries yet, so keep that in mind as well. So we're already kind of a responsive website, even though we haven't used any media queries, which is great. This is how you kind of want to be thinking in that frame of mind. Okay, so let's see what else we got here. We have our header area. Let's go ahead and target the header area as well. Site header, give it a border, 1 pixel solid green. Save that just so we could see the outline of everything. So there's that header there at the top. Cool. And if I look down over here, we want to target this copy container. Let's go ahead and target that as well. Scroll down. Copy container, give it a border. I'm gonna give this one 2 pixel solid blue. Save that, refresh this page. Cool. So there's our copy container. So remember, we have a sidebar right down over here. So what I want to do in this particular example is have this content be off to the left and have this sidebar be off to the right over here. So I'm going to use percentage values to do that, and I'm going to use CSS floats to do this. Now, you're welcome to use Flexbox if you're comfortable with Flexbox, but in this example, I'm just going to use CSS floats to keep it relatively straightforward. So let's go ahead and do that now. So first thing first, we want to go ahead and target this this copy here. So remember, we have copy container right over here, and right after that, its sibling is the sidebar. So I want to target the copy container. Scroll down over here, copy, float, left. I'm gonna give it a width. Let's just give it 60%. Save and watch what happens. Okay, so what's going on? This whole container just collapsed on us. And this is a result of CSS floats. This is why CSS floats aren't so great. This is why Flexbox is so much better. But we want, if we're using CSS floats because we want to be compatible perhaps with older browsers, things like that, this is one of the problems with CSS floats that needs to be addressed. So what's happening here is this entire container is floating. That thing is particularly wrong per se. This is what floats do. So we want to fix that. And so if you're using HTML5 boilerplate and you scroll down a little bit, you'll see a little class in here called ClearFix, and that's exactly what we're going to be using here. So head on over to your index.html, and what I want to do is apply the ClearFix. I'm going to go ahead and apply to this container, ClearFix. Save that, refresh this page, and we're back in business. And here's that sidebar right over here. Now it's butting up against this copy container, which is not what we want to do. Rather, the copy tag, the copy class tag. So we want this to be over to the right. So let's do this. Let's also create an outline for ourselves as well, so that this way we can see what's going on. So border 1 pixel solid. We'll give this a color of orange. Save that. Refresh this page. So there's that orange. Let me make this kind of thick. Let's go with 4 pixels just so we could see the outline. So there's that copy. Now where's that sidebar? Let's see if we can fix that for ourselves as well. So we want to target the site sidebar here. Come back into here, site sidebar, and I'm going to float this to the right. Cool. And I'm going to give this a width. I'm going to give this a width of, let's say, 35%. Give this a border 4 pixel solid. Let's give it pink. And let's refresh this page, and there it is as well. There's a sidebar. So this is a very simple example of a floated, two floated containers, one to the left, one to the right. It's 60% on this side and 35% in the sidebar on the right hand side. Good to go. So if you refresh this page, things are relatively responsive. They're kind of responding. There's no horizontal scrolling, so that's good, but we can do better. So if we can leave the footer part alone, nothing really special going on over here. So this is where I want to introduce media queries and how we can use that to help this become even more responsive. So if I reduce this in size, keep going down, you'll see it's getting narrower and narrower, and at this point around here it's getting pretty narrow. So we want to fix that and make it a little bit better. So what we want to do is have this stack on top of one another. Okay, so one easy way to figure out when we want this breakpoint to happen is to use our inspector. So if you're using Chrome, right click anywhere on the page, click inspect, and because you have this developer tools open and you resize this browser, look over here in the top right hand corner of the viewport. You'll see that the width here changes. So if we pay attention to that and we come down to, let's say 500 pixels, 550 pixels, that's where we want this layout to change. So 500 pixels is going to be our breakpoint. Okay, so that's great. So we figured out where we want that change to happen. Now, how do we actually apply that change? So I'm going to head back over to this using media queries on the MDN page. And here's a really simple example of a media query, which is exactly what we're going to use now. They use 600 pixels. In fact, we can do the same. You can feel free to copy and paste this over, but we'll just go ahead and type it out over here. And what this is basically doing, the first on line 6 over here, it's creating a rule, and what this rule is saying, it needs to be true or false, if you will. So what this is saying, at the media, if the window is max width 600 pixels or below, so max width 600 pixels or below, this is going to be true, and this will take effect. If this window size is above 600 pixels, so if it's 605 for example, this will no longer be true. Okay, so let's see that in action. So in here you want to do at media. Okay, set our parameter max width 600 pixels. Cool. Open bracket, close bracket, make sure to do that. So what we want to do at this stage, in a window size that's 600 pixels and below, we want to target the copy class, and instead of having float left and width, rather float left and width 60%, what we want to do is float none with 100%. Cool. And we really want to do the same thing to the site sidebar here. So copy that. I'm going to put a comma after the copy class, paste that in as well. So because we want to apply this rule to both the copy and the side sidebar. And we only want this to happen at 600 pixels and below. So if I save this, come back, refresh the page, things look good here because we're above 600 pixels. We have our developer tools open right over here, meaning we'll see the numbers show up over here for the width and height. So if we reduce this size and let's get over to 600 pixels, watch what happens. Boom. Now we have a stacking page. Okay, so that's an example of using max width. Now you can also reverse this and do min width. So you could do this, min width. And what you can actually do is you can copy, let me go ahead and copy this portion here, just so you can see an example of kind of this in reverse. Go ahead and select all that, indent it in, cut this from here, paste that right over here. Cool. And what we're doing, we don't need this here, and we don't need this here as well, and we won't be needing that, and we won't be needing that as well. So what we want to do, wait, did I cut out the wrong oh wait, this is copy container. I got the wrong thing. Let's copy that out. So we won't need the border because we're doing that up here. What I want to do is target the side sidebar here. I think I accidentally deleted too much. Float right. And what we want to do is give it a width, 30%. Okay, back in business. Excellent. And what we're doing here, the rule in this media query, what we're doing is that when your browser window is above 600 pixels, then apply these rules. If it's below 600 pixels, use the default, if you will, here. So if I save this, refresh the page, here's that same layout, but if you come back down, it's the same thing as well. So it's kind of a mobile first approach. So if you're mobile first approach, this is what you have, the styles. And then as you get to a desktop, you then want to include some additional styles to take up more space. Otherwise it gets too wide. Because if we had this, so I'm going to select all of this and I'm going to go ahead and comment this out. So let's go ahead and do that now. Put a /, put the asterisk here. Perfect. Save that, refresh the page. This gets too wide. This gets too wide, and there's really no reason for it to be this wide. So this is why we're using something like this. So this is kind of a mobile first approach. The reverse, which is what you saw in the beginning, would be, I guess, a desktop first approach. So that's going to be, up to you. I've worked in both scenarios, depending on your project. I can't say, honestly, I can't say one is better approach is better than the other approach. It just depends on the project you're working on. But that's how you would use media queries. Now on this page, you'll see there's different kind of rules you can apply. You can do at media, minimum width 700 pixels, and the orientation is landscape. So if you're on a mobile device and if you want to have some special styles when they're on a landscape view, you can do that as well. So in this space here, you would include your special styles, your special CSS styles. You could target TVs. You could target handhelds here. You can target a lot of different things and a lot of different measurements, colors, things like that. Generally speaking, I've only been using simple media queries like this to target mobile devices. That's worked out really well for me. I use the orientation. That's also worked out really well for me. So even on this website, you'll see that the media queries are in action. See the sidebar here? As I reduce this side, the sidebar, I believe it goes down to the bottom somewhere, or maybe to the top. Oh wait, maybe it's, here we go, it's right over here. Cool. So see, you can do different things, style your website differently depending on the layout, all by using media queries. And here's all the different options that you can do. Orientation, that's another very popular one, media query that I use. You can determine if your phone is in portrait or landscape, things like that. It's really great stuff. Lots of different control you have, but to keep it basic for this video, we're just going to go ahead and use a simple max width or min width depending on which approach you would like to take. Okay, so we've used pixels for the borders in this example. Let's go ahead and use pixels for font sizes. So here's our font size right over here. So let's go and target if we come back over here, target the copy p tags. So let's go and do that now. So .copy paragraph tag. Let's give it a font size 24 pixels. Save that. Refresh this page. It's got pretty large now. So a pixel is a fixed font size. It's a good choice when you need a pixel accuracy. But that's the thing about a mobile responsive website. Pixel accuracy doesn't quite work for us because you don't know if people are viewing your website on a TV, on a tablet, on a phone. That's not really going to work out too good. It might look way too big, let's say on a small phone, for example. So that's not too good. Now you can tackle this with media queries. So for example, if I were to copy this, I'm going to go ahead and paste this into here. And let's say the default size is going to be 14 pixels, but if you're above 600 pixels, it'll go back up to 24. Save that, refresh this page. So if you go down below, you'll see that the font size changed to small. You can tackle it this way. So this is one way of doing that by still using pixels if that's what you want to go with. So there's another way we can do this as well. It's called ems. So the size of an em value is dynamic. When defining the font size property, an em is equal to the size of the font that is applied to the parent of the element in question. So what does that mean exactly? So let's go ahead and I'm going to erase this. We don't really need that anymore. Actually, we can just erase the value in here. We'll keep that as well. So if we come back over here, our parent in our case is going to be, let's say, post. Okay, so let's target post. Let's give it a font size. I'm going to give it a font size of 1em. So what 1em is equal to, by default, 1em is equal to, I'll make a little note over here, 1em equal to 16 pixels. That's the default. Okay, default browser size. So 1em equals 16 pixels. That's the default. So if I put that to 1em, save this. Let's see what we have here. Okay, nothing changed. So now, based on this font size, if we go ahead and target, let's say, this p tag that's inside this post here, which is in fact the which is in fact the copy rather. So let's go ahead and just to make it more specific for us, let me erase this. So remember, the post is right here. This is the p paragraph tag I'm going for. So let's go and do that now. Post p, and let's give this a font size of 2ems. Save that. Refresh this page. Okay, so what happened here? What's 2ems? So it's 16 times 2, which is going to be equal to 32. So that's the font size. That's what based on this rule here. If I were to change this value, however, let's do 0.5, save that. You'll see that the font size changed based on the values that we gave it up here. So this is having control of whatever size is here. So if you do, let's say, for example, 2ems, so that's 32 pixels here. Now if you do 2ems here, can you guess what it's going to be? So if I refresh this page, it's going to be quite large. So what happened here? So it's going to be actually 2 times 32 pixels. Okay, so that's how ems work. So it's a parent-child relationship. So it affects all the font sizes. So up over here is the parent, and here is the child. So let's go ahead and target the H2, H3. So we have post H2, comma, dot post H3. We'll target both of them. Let's also give this a font size of 2. We'll send this back to 1. Refresh this page. Okay, this is pretty large. Why? Because we took a 32. Remember, this is equal to 32 pixels. And then in here, which is the child, we took 2 times 32 pixels. And this is the font size we get here. And remember, this here is 1. So this is being 16 pixels. But based on its parents, it's set to 2ems. So this becomes 32 pixels. Okay, so why is this all important? So we have different font sizes set up on the H2 and the H3 and the P tag. So instead of manually selecting each font size, a different font size, for example, you can very easily just change one value and have all the child font sizes change as well in a more proportional manner, if you will. So here we have min width of 600 pixels. So if we get above 600 pixels, let's go ahead and target that post. Okay, let's give it a font size. We'll send it back to 1em. Save that, refresh this page. Okay, so there's our default values again. If I reduce this to a smaller device, say on a phone, things get larger, which is might be what we expect it to be. So that's how you would use an M. Okay, so the other font size I want to show you is called Rem. So Rem is includes it's a relative font size of the root, the HTML element, okay? So not the parent. The parent is totally ignored. So let's go ahead and do that now. So I'm going to go ahead and change these values here. Let's go ahead and change this to, actually, we won't be needing this anymore. So we're going to be targeting the HTML tag as our parent root, if you will. And here we'll change this to 2 rems. 1 rem. So rem m, so remember 1 rem is also equal to, I'm just going to copy this as well. So by default 1 rem is also equal to 16 pixels, but we can change the default because we're using rems. So let me go ahead and change this as well. I should get rid of that. Save that. Let's see what we have here for now. Perfect. Okay, so all we've done here, remember 2 rems is equal to 32 pixels because that's what 1 rem is equal to. 1 rem is equal to 16 pixels times 2. We get 32 here and we get 16 here. So if we wanted to change these values, we would look to our HTML tag. So down over here, I'm going to type in the HTML tag. Font size. Now here you will have to use pixels. So I'm going to change this from the default 16 pixels to, let's say, 12 pixels. Save that, refresh this page. You'll see everything change dynamically based on the root font size right over here. Great. So why is this important? Well, let's say, for example, we want this to be 18 pixels as the default, okay? And if we wanted to go larger than that, so let's say on a phone, we're okay with this large size, but when you get to a desktop, maybe not so much. You can change that over here, HTML, and I'll change that root size, maybe something smaller, 12 pixels. Save that, refresh this page, and everything gets smaller and then larger again. Okay, so the benefit of using rem versus m is that rem you only have to change one value, which is going to be your HTML tag, change the default size from 16 pixels to something like 12 pixels, and then because you're using rem font sizes throughout your website, so you'll be using maybe in the sidebar, your links, your headings, things like that, everything will change dynamically. Okay, so remember by default 1 rem is equal to 16 pixels, but you could also change it using media queries by changing the default font size from 16 pixels, let's say, to 12 pixels, or you can go 18 pixels, so one way or the other. But you only need to change it to one place and it'll change it everywhere. Whereas M's is just related to your parent-child relationship. So if you set up M's in this container here, and whatever font sizes you change in the parent font size, that's what will be applied to the child. So it's sort of exclusive only to one area. So in my experience right now, I'm using rems by default. I find it to be the best way for a responsive website to keep things really consistent. And keep in mind, this also applies to things like margins and padding. So what do I mean by that? So if we come back, I'm going to cut this. I'm going to move this to the top of the page. Right below that. Perfect. So for example, what do I mean by that? By it also affects things like margins and padding. Well, let's take this container, for example. Padding, let's give this a padding of 2 rems. So that's 32 pixels by default, but in fact we actually changed it to 18 pixels, so 18 times 2. So if I refresh this page, there's that padding right over here that we created, this padding right over here. Cool. So if you look down over here, we changed that root, the font size from 18, which we set up right over here, to 12 when it's above 600 pixels. But if I get lower here, it's going to get larger. You see that? So it also affects, so this font size in the HTML in pixels also affects things like paddings, margin, anywhere you would use rems, that's where that would be affected throughout the whole website. So how cool is that? So not only do you have font sizes changing dynamically, but you also have things like paddings and margin changing dynamically as well. And that's it. So that's how you would use rems, ems with media queries for a responsive website.